since Spacies is now a member of the Ministry of Retro Gaming, world's oldest gaming merchandise.
Since Spacies.
G'day invaders, welcome to Since Spacies, and I'm going to do a video on something really different compared to anything else I've done so far. So recently I made a purchase online, something really cool that I thought, wow, I really need that. But when I got it, it got me thinking, am I holding the world's oldest video game piece of merchandise? Something you don't really think about. Now, if you have a look in my room, there is a ton of merchandise here. Caps, hats, shirts. The merchandising is still quite not at the level I'd like, but it's getting there, all right? For example, I'd love to have more shirts in different styles available, but they're not quite at that level yet. They're getting there. But yeah, when I got this item, I got to thinking, I think I'm holding the world's oldest piece of video game merchandise. So I'm just going to explain. I got to thinking, what is the world's oldest video game merchandise? And at first I thought it might have been the Activision badges. So these were badges, patches that you got to put on your sleeve when you earned a certain score, or usually it was a score that you had to reach within a game. You'd take a photo of that and send that off to Activision, and they'll mail you back a patch that you could wear in pride. And unfortunately, the only way you can get those now is to actually buy them off eBay. A really cool idea, and they were the world's first achievements, I guess you could say. But my merchandise predates that by about 3 years. So back in Australia, during 1979, Space Invaders was huge. In fact, arcades started to rise up from the ashes, I guess you could say, and they were starting to get really big. And a couple of guys in Warner Brother Music, or Warner Music, I think it was in Sydney, they were going through some really good times back then. Australian music was much more predominant back then than it is now. And they were rich enough to have their very own Space Invaders arcade cabinet in their studio. And they got to thinking, we need to cash in on this craze, on this frenzy of video gaming that's starting, and in particular for Space Invaders. So they decided to put out an album called Game Over. And the song was developed, I've got the names here, Russell Dunlop and Bruce Brown, very Australian names, because they had their own cabinet and they wanted to cash in on that. They didn't want a big hit though, they just wanted to get something out there. I guess they were just trying to explore their artistic boundaries. They put it out under the name of Player One. I've got the single here, and that's it. That's the single. I'll get it out of its case. Hang on, I'm trying not to ruin this. So there you go, that's a record, boys and girls, if you're too young to know. And that's a single. So yeah, they were inspired by the sounds of the Space Invaders cabinet, and they figured, how are we going to get this into music? There must be a way. So they got together and put together a whole album. They sent it off to the US, the bigwigs in the US. They didn't like it. They thought that it was immature and it was more aimed at 13 and 14-year-olds. They didn't care. They went on and released it anyway here in Australia, and it stayed in the top charts for 28 weeks. It reached number 3. And that's the only place it charted in. Every other country it failed miserably. A year later, England actually did produce a Space Invaders single, but it was nowhere near as good as this bad boy. I'm so glad that I've got this. The B-side on this is called A Menacing Glow in the Sky. So they've kept the theme of invaders and coming from space. The other songs on the album that they released, you don't hear about them. In fact, I've never heard them, so they've kind of gone into obscurity. But this is, I think, a piece of gaming history. This is the very first merchandised item. It wasn't actually officially sanctioned by Taito because that kind of thing just didn't happen back then. It wasn't really something that was, this is the early days of video games. Games were not even in color back then. So it was still developing. And I'm challenging anyone out there on the internets, please leave a comment below if you know of something that predates this. Merchandising, video game related. I think this is the world's oldest, and it was done right here in Sydney, in Australia. So I'm kind of chuffed to be able to say that. I think Australians in general really grabbed the whole video game phenomenon and just with both hands and really latched on. They were really passionate. Arcade machines were everywhere. Video games were huge here, especially the arcades. The arcade scene was really big. So yeah, I just thought I'd put this video out, a bit of video game history here in my hands. I am going to try and get my hands on the 12-inch version that came out, which is what you're hearing. It actually, I think, is a lot better. But still, I just love the artwork. The Space Invaders cabinet, they surely must have got some sort of copyright entitlements to use that. But you don't actually see the words Taito mentioned anywhere on the album, so they didn't actually officially acknowledge Taito as being the owners of Space Invaders. So there you go. That was just a bit of a look at something that I thought, hang on a minute, I think we've got a little bit of gaming history here. So I thought I'd put that onto the channel. Leave a like and a comment on this comment section below, and tell me if you think that you might find something else that predates that. I challenge you to find me anything else that's video game related that predates that. Remember, it's 1979, so if it's the 80s onwards, you're out of luck. It's not older. Until then, my name has been Brian, and I've been gaming since Spaceys. Thanks, guys.
Since Spaceys.